Oh, hello there. One moment. Now, in today's story, we witness the rise of evil and the birth of the first demon and her story of sorrow. But before we jump in, do you crave something new and original? Yeah! Well, here at Krane Originals, that's exactly what we are trying to accomplish. But we can't do it without you, adventurer. We need your help to craft the world of sha'rune. A world where a father can find a hero's redemption. Where a girl's paintings can change her destiny. Where one like and subscribe can make all the difference. But enough with the begging. And without any further ado, sit back, relax, and together, let's explore another tale in the world of sha'rune. In the age before demon lords took hold and corrupted the land, before Azimuth crafted the moon to guide the mortals home, and before Razmagul raised the sun from his fury, there existed an era of harmony. During this time, the world was young and ruled by 7 Primordial Lords. Humans experienced nothing but peace, and the world was bright and evil had not yet laid her roots. This is the story of how sorrow can be twisted into fear and anger, and how betrayal and the abyss found their way into sha'rune. This is the tale of the first demon. Our story begins at a funeral, where a boy far too young had passed. He was playing with his friends in a place he was warned not to. He was told by his mother it was too dangerous. But as youth often does, he would disregarded his mother's warning, thinking he knew better, thinking nothing could go wrong. But on top of a hill, he ran too close to the edge, and when his friends pushed him innocently, laughing the entire time, their world changed while his ended far too soon. He fell, never to wake again. This was 2 days ago. Now his mother stood over his body, trembling as hot tears ran down her face. She looked over as the children, her son's friends, all looked down at their feet, crying in shame, guilt, and with broken little hearts. Some of them, even at a young age, were pure enough to wish it had been them instead. But none of this helped Rell as she wept. Even her husband holding her somehow did nothing but upset her, enrage her. She blamed him. She blamed herself. She blamed the children. She blamed the world. The ceremony only lasted an hour. It was all the time she was given to say goodbye to her heart. She watched as his body was pushed to sea, a small coffin moving further and further away. It somehow felt as if she was losing him all over again. She watched as one of the great Primordial Lords watched with them, his face filled with sorrow. He was Thalmor, Lord of Stone and Earth and of Order. To all but Rell, his presence was a great honor, but to her, she had a feeling now towards the Primordial Lords that no human had felt before. She felt disgust and anger. For you see, the day after the boy passed, just yesterday, she stood before Thalmor and Avarice, the Lord of Time, the first hour they called him. She had begged for a miracle. She had begged the great Time Lord to bring her son back. But instead of granting her wish, she was lectured by them on how this was natural. But to Rell, what was natural about this? How could losing her child be natural? It made no sense. She even tried to bargain, offering her life instead. But nothing. But no matter what she said, the lords would not budge. After the ceremony, after everyone left, she stood silent, looking at the sea, hoping it would bring her baby back. Even as morning came, her husband would find her sleeping in the sand, her face dirty with sand and dried tears. He tried to scoop her up, tried to bring her back home, but when he woke her, the first thing she did was scream out her son's name, yelling it over and over. "Remy! Remy!" she shouted, looking frantically all around for him, shoving her husband with all her might. But then it was as if a switch had clicked on, almost like reality itself had truly sunk in. Quickly, Rell calmed down, almost instantly, as she sat on her knees, her hands politely, almost properly, over her lap, as she just looked out to the sea. She did not say anything. Her husband, Rufus, all he could do was quietly sit next to her, watching the sea, crying together as one. After that, weeks would pass by, and well, Rufus would not heal, but he did begin to go back to his daily routine. He'd begin to live again, which mostly only consisted of him fishing and hunting with the other men. Rell, however, she couldn't move on. She could barely eat, usually having to be forced by others to even take a bite. She did not talk to anyone. She never left her home, which was a sort of makeshift mud hut that they lived in. In a way, it became her coffin, one that was made of sorrow and grief. If depression and grief were all Rell had to deal with, maybe, just maybe like her husband, maybe she could have moved on, began to live again. But it was not just the loss of her son that haunted her. No, there was something more happening to her each night. At first, it started with a whisper, a faint whisper of words she cannot understand, of a language that was foreign to her ears. At first, the voice sounded like a faraway wind, but as each day passed, right before Rell would go to sleep, she could hear the voice clearer and clearer, until finally she recognized its voice. It was her son. Remy had been speaking to her somehow. The moment she realized who was talking to her, she thought it was a miracle, a blessing. And this had a profound effect on Rell. Not only did she think her son was talking to her from beyond, but she felt that she had a reason to live again. Instantly, the next day, Rell would wake up with a smile on her face, and she would kiss her husband in the morning, much to Rufus's surprise. But Rufus, he had spent nearly a month now watching his wife do nothing but cry and wither away, so he did not ask questions. Even when Rell told him that he must come to her when the sun set, that she had a gift for him, he had no idea what it could be. But again, seeing his wife happy for the first time in a while, Rufus did not ask questions. Instead, he just said, okay, kissed his wife, and told her he would be with her tonight. He promised. The day would pass, and when night came, Rell waited excitedly for her son to come speak to her and her husband. Rufus was confused. He watched his wife with a smile all day, and now, with her hands clenched, almost like she was praying, she waited, staring at the fire they had lit in the center of their home to stay warm. Moments would pass, and nothing would happen. At first, Rell stayed calm, waiting for Remy to reveal himself like he had every night before. But nothing. Rell began to fidget nervously. Her smile was long gone. Her husband, concerned and confused, asked her what this was all about. Why? What were they waiting for? But instead of responding, she ignored her husband completely as she began to scream out for their son. "Remy! Remy!" the mother shouted as she looked around the house like a madwoman. Rufus watched, confused and scared of what was happening. He didn't know why Rell was acting like this. But Rell, she still just kept screaming out for their son. Until finally, Rufus, he couldn't watch any longer. He had had enough and grabbed his wife, tried to shake her to her senses. "Our son is dead!" he shouted, not in anger, but in distress, in panic. He felt he was now losing his wife too, and all the man could do was hold on to her, try with all his might to shake her back to reality, to bring her back to him. But Rell just kept screaming, crying out for her son. It would be over an hour before the poor woman finally tired herself out, passing out in the arms of Rufus, who he now was shaking. He did not know how to help her. He was powerless. All he knew was that when the day came, he would seek the Primordial Lords. Yes, they would know what to do, he thought, and beg them, pray to them, offer them anything in hopes they can help his wife. Help her with whatever was harming her. He knew they would help. Early before the sun even rose, Rufus would leave. He did not want to leave Rell alone, but he was terrified to face her. He did not know what to say, what to do. So before Rell would even wake, Rufus would take off, hoping he could reach the Lords and that they might help cure his wife of whatever disease was taking hold of her before she even had awakened. But you see, it would only be a few minutes after Rufus left, Rell would be startled awake by voices around their home once more. But this time, it was different. The voices weren't calm like before. It was loud and angry and somehow violent. At the same time, it almost impossible once more to understand. Their home was small, but the purple mist that was consuming her home was large as it swirled around her place, covering every inch around Rell. She was scared, screaming for help, but the mist continued to shout back at her until finally Rell broke down and fell to her knees, begging for mercy, pleading to whatever was haunting her to just leave her be, or to just give her back her son, to wake her from this nightmare. Finally, the mist calmed, and it retracted back to the fire. Rell looked, her body trembling. She crawled away, slowly, scared, trying not to anger whatever this was, whatever this mist haunting her was. She didn't know. But as her hands reached out for the door to her home, she saw the face of her son appear once more. Do you want him? Do you want your son back? A voice asked. It was shaking and windy and hard to hear, but just clear enough. She understood. Still scared, still trembling, Rell slowly began to crawl back inside, crawl towards the fire as she cried, nodding her head slowly. You could literally hear her teeth chattering against each other. She was petrified. But despite that, despite everything, she couldn't understand at that moment. She knew one thing for sure. She wanted her son back. Give him to me, please. Please, give me back my boy. What would you do for your son back? The mist asked, its voice soothing, almost sounding more like a man than a force of nature. Rell, without hesitation, looked deep in the image of her son. She reached out to it, her heart sinking as her hand went through it. Anything, she said. Anything. The purple mist once again swirled now, began to swirl again, demanding that she leave right now, that she must go to the forest, away from prying eyes, that she must travel to a place she did not know, but that it would guide her, that there, and only there, away from the sights of the Primordial Lords, that he would take her to her son. Rell was nervous at first. She did not know what this mist was. She knew, though, in her heart, she could feel it. She knew it was something dark. It was something evil. And despite her need, her desire to be reunited with her son, she could not help but foolishly question the mist that spoke to her. Why? She asked. Her hands instinctively rose, as if her question was a mistake, one that could cost her greatly. She put her hands up, scared that the mist would attack her. But instead of roaring, instead of striking Rell, the mist stood calm and asked her if she really loved her son. Rell was offended. Of course she did, she screamed. Then, with almost a chuckle, it mockingly asked her, do you love the Primordial Lords? This question felt almost wrong to her. Like, it took her back by surprise. She didn't even know what to say to that. Love them? She was grateful to them. She had worshipped them. They were beings of great power and importance, but love them? She had never really thought of it like that. I don't know, Rell stuttered. But I know I love my son. The mist, once again, chuckled before asking her another question. Do you hate them? The question was like a shot of clarity and confusion at the same time. Rell, she felt lightheaded. She knew that whatever this thing was, it was truly evil. It was wrong. But what it was, she could not say. And why it sounded like it had such disdain for the Primordial Lords, such hatred for them, she could not understand. They were beacons of harmony, peacekeepers. Why would anything want to challenge them? The mist watched her. She could see, she could tell its eyes were upon her despite not seeing any around her. No, she whispered. I don't hate them. Once more the mist swirled around the room, this time engulfing Rell. and whispering deep into her ear, deep into her soul. But they want to give him back. Do you know how easy it would be, how little effort it would take to bring back your boy? Rell, she began to tear up as she felt a sting of pain and anger rush through her. I could bring him back, and I'm not nearly what they are, yet I can do it. Rell listened to its words and shouted, "Then give him back!" The mist nearly laughed at her. In time. But first, you must come with me. With that, the mist blew the door open and slithered its way through the village, leaving a trail for Rell to follow. With heartbroken tears, Rell took a deep breath and followed the mist. Meanwhile, while Rell was being led away by the mist, her husband Rufus had ventured deep into the singing forest, a place where trees had stories to tell, if you would just wait a moment to listen. But Rufus had no time for such songs as he pushed through the forest, calling out to the Primordial Lords for aid. Yet, despite his pleas, it would not be until midday that his call would be answered. A furious Lord of Time would appear before Rufus, his long black cloak draped down, casting a shadow over the ground around him. His hood and what appeared to be an iron mask that covered his face shrouded him. His hourglass of time was loosely held in his hand as he looked down at Rufus, though, despite so many, his appearance may be that of fear. There was a gentle calm about the Lord, one that any mortal who stood in his presence could feel. "You seek me, child?" Epherius asked. Each word he said hissed like that of a snake. Rufus would begin to plead for the Lord's help, telling him how his wife had gone mad, how she could not let go. He tried to tell him what had happened the night before, how she had waited for their son, as if he was actually going to come home, as if it was even possible. As Rufus pleaded his case, he begged for help. Epherius stood still as a statue, his face covered. It was impossible for Rufus to know if his words were having any effect. It wasn't until he was done that the Lord of Time placed his hand upon the man's shoulder, gently and comforting. "I'm sorry, Rufus, but what plagues your wife is not within my powers to fix." Rufus at first just stared blankly into the iron mask. "But you must." He tried to protest, but his words were cut short as the Lord of Time raised his hand, silencing the man. "I am sorry." That was all Epherius spoke as he disappeared into the shadow. Rufus reached out, trying to grab the Lord of Time before he could leave, but he was too slow. Then the man just sat there, defeated, unsure what to do, terrified to return back to his wife. Moments would pass, and finally the man would break down in tears, crying and sobbing into his hands. Then the man screamed with such fierce anger and hopelessness that even the trees around him shook with sorrow. While Rufus cried in one forest, Rell was led to another, deep into a forest she was very familiar with, yet somehow she felt lost as she was surrounded by the purple mist that guided her. The entire forest somehow felt filled with it, a disease taking the very forced away. It would be hours she walked, her feet sore and blistered. She would ask the mist how much further, how much longer. But all the mist would do was whisper to her in her son's voice from afar. Mom? It was cruel, twisted, and Rell knew it. But she also knew that this may be the only chance. So for Remy, she would soldier on, following the sound of her boy, and knowing in her heart it wasn't him, but hoping it might lead her to the real thing, to her son. Hours would pass until finally the woman collapsed. She could not walk anymore. Her feet were throbbing, her ankles were sore, and her sides cramped so bad that she hunched over and she hobbled herself forward. But as Rell fell to her knees, the fog around her began to disappear, and the purple mist now swirled before her, almost as if it was dancing. Rell watched as the shoreline was revealed to her, slowly as the mist parted. It was here that you sent him away, was it not? The mist finally spoke in its own voice once more. Rell did not respond. She looked out to the sea, her body in pain. She began to tremble, remembering the day all over again. It had been just over a month, but she could remember it as if it were happening to her right in that moment all over again. She could see the children who had killed her son, guilty faces across them. How dare they even have the right to come to her son's funeral? The little monsters, she thought. She could feel her husband's hands on her shoulder. How could he say goodbye to their son? How could he not fight? How could he not beg the lords like she had done to bring him back? But above all, she could see Thalmor, the Lord of Order and Earth, his face filled with fake sorrow. Even though she knew he had the power to change it all, to undo her pain, to give her son a chance to grow, to live again, to become a man. The mist could feel her anger. Finally, Rell would answer the mist. Yes, this is where they sent him away. And they wouldn't help you, would they? The mist whispered back. Its words were soothing and cruel at the same time. Rell furiously shook her head. No! No! It was all she could do. Her heart was breaking all over again as she looked out across the ocean. How could she let them send him away, she thought. How? The mist swirled around Rell, and gently, almost like a long-lost friend, it grabbed Rell by the chin and lifted her, forcing her to watch out across the ocean. Rell's eyes widened with so many emotions that she could not believe what she was witnessing. She saw in the distance her son's coffin slowly being pulled back towards her. I told you I could help you, the mist whispered. Its words sent shivers down Rell's spine. As soon as the coffin reached the shore, Rell ran. She did not care how much her body hurt, how much it ached, how badly she felt. She ran as fast as she could, and well she did. The mist wrapped itself around her, almost as if it was helping her along the way. Remy! Remy! Rell screamed. I'm here! The mother said as her fingers dug into the sides of the coffin, trying her hardest to rip the top off. But she wasn't strong enough. Her fingers began to bleed as she struggled to open the coffin. But no matter what, she couldn't do it. And frustration and anger and pain started to overtake her. as she looked around hysterically for someone or something to help her get her son back. Finally, she heard a whisper from the mist. "Allow me." Its words faded, but just as it went away, a violent burst of air and energy ripped open the top of the coffin. It happened so suddenly that Rell fell onto her back in shock and awe. The smell was the first thing that hit her. It was vile and overwhelming. It brought Rell back down to her knees, almost causing her to vomit. But she fought through the stench as she climbed the coffin. Weakly, Rell slowly crept up to look inside. What happened next? What she saw next was horrendous. Something no mother should have to witness. It was her boy. No, it was what was left of him. Decayed, rot. His skin was dry as leather. His hair and nails dirty but long. It was not Remy. She thought it couldn't be. This was not her son. Rell quickly pushed herself away and fell to her knees. She pushed her face into the sand and shouted and screamed, trying to force herself to wake up from this nightmare. "That isn't my son!" she screamed as she rose, pointing at the coffin. "That is not my son!" "But it is," whispered the mist. "It is." Rell broke. Her vision swirled as she grabbed her hair. Her chest felt like it was filled with ice. Her head felt like it was on fire. She shook her head violently and screaming and protesting. No, that is not him. Give me back my son," she pleaded. The mist swirled. It just swirled around her, feeling her, almost as if it was just growing from her pain. But before she could say another word, it just disappeared like nothing. And it just swirled so quickly, so abruptly. She watched as it now consumed the coffin before just disappearing all at once into the coffin, filling it. Rell watched in horror as she slowly creeped towards it. But before she could peek back into the coffin, his son's body rose. His eyes and mouth glowed with a purple energy, with the same mist that had been guiding her. While his hands reached out to Rell, the mother, she went back. She didn't want this. "Stop!" she cried, shaking her fists, praying for the strength to stop it. "Let him go! Let him go! Let my son go! Stop, please!" And to Rell's shock, it listened. The mist lifted her son's body, letting it drop back into the coffin, and with a loud and horrible thud, and let the little decayed boy hit the wet and broken coffin. Now Rell watched as the mist grew and grew larger and larger with such force. It felt as if it was going to sweep her off her feet. The woman cried. She prayed for it to stop. She apologized and asked to just be let go as her feet slowly left the ground. "Do you not want your son back?" the mist asked. Its voice now boomed like thunder. It was commanding like it had never been before. It felt like it was old and ominous, and its words carried a certainty that felt timeless and wrong and twisted with intent. Rell did not answer. Instead, she screamed in horror as she was lifted higher and higher. She looked down as she rose, and the mist was taking her. But as she looked, she saw her boy's coffin. She saw his decayed corpse within it. And despite her fear, she reached out to it, tried to swim through the mist. But no matter how hard she tried, she was lifted further and further away until finally it consumed her entirely. And all she saw was it around her. The force, the mist, it was consuming her. She wasn't sure if she was still moving or still. It was as if reality itself had abandoned her. Even her screams could not be heard through the violent winds that shook around her, until finally, after what felt like a never-ending fall, it stopped and released her. At first, Rell just took a moment for her to gather herself, to understand where it had taken her. But the second she realized, her heart sank. It had taken her to where it all began, to the hilltop where her son was taken from her, where the children played, and she failed to keep her safe. "Why?" the woman cried. "Why did you bring me here? Please, please, just take me home." But the mist, it did not care. Instead, it showed no mercy. Instead, it simply taunted the woman once more, calmly. "But as before, I will ask you once more, do you want your son back?" Rell looked around, trying to stay focused, trying to gather her thoughts. She was beyond scared, beyond able to understand what or why this was happening to her. But she looked at the mist, and weakly, meekly, she mustered up a response, the only one she still knew she could give. "I want my son as he was," she whispered. "I want him alive. I want him back as before." She took a moment, gripping her chest, and she looked down as she thought carefully of what she was about to say, about how to bargain with this evil before her. "Can you do that? Can you give him back as he was?" There was a silence, a moment. "No," the mist whispered. Rell once more just fell to her knees, crying. She had no words, no thoughts. Pain consumed her. It was like the last bit of life in her was just whisked away. She was no longer scared. She was worse. She was defeated, broken, no more alive than her son was in that moment. And the mist knew it. It knew as it watched that the woman had nothing left, and it grew more prominent than ever before. For a moment, it just watched as the woman suffered, before it finally broke its silence. It waited to make sure that every last bit of hope was gone. "Not alone. Not alone, I can't." Rell stared at the mist. Her stomach still shook, and her face was fresh with tears. But she had none more to give. "What do you want?" That was it. That was the last bit of strength she had. "I want to help you. I want to be able to help everyone." The mist spoke in a way that even Rell, despite how lost she was. She could tell it was lying to her. Enough. Please, just tell me what you want of me. Finally, the mist took a form. It was that of a man. Not solid. Not quite there. But unmistakably a man. It walked to Rell. With every step it came closer, and she felt colder and colder, almost as if the world around it turned gray, until finally the mist was upon her. It placed its hands out, and with only a moment of reluctance, the mother took its hands, and it lifted her once more. The mist then guided her to the edge of the cliff, the same cliff that her boy had fallen from. And then, almost like a loving father, it wrapped its arms around her, looking down at the side, forcing her body to tilt in a way that she had no choice but to look as well. Alone, I'm not strong enough to bring him back. But together, we can do anything. It whispered slowly into her ears. Rell looked down the cliffside, and without the mist needing to say another word, she took a step forward. Meanwhile, back at the village, Rufus had returned home, scared and petrified to face his wife. He wasn't sure if he should even tell her where he was, or if he should just lie. He wondered if she would even care. But to his surprise, Rell was nowhere to be seen. At first he was confused, but immediately he became concerned. He knew she was not in her right mind, and it was nearing nighttime. So quickly, Rufus went to the friends and family, from hut to hut. He asked everyone he knew, and even some he didn't know, if anyone knew where Rell was. But none seemed to know. Nobody even seemed to know that she was missing. They had all assumed she was in her home like she had always been in the past month. After checking the entire village and the sun now setting, Rufus and his cousin and a few of Rell's family members had all begun to worry. After, of course, Rufus had even explained to them how she was earlier in the day. So knowing this, they checked the nearby forest. They called out to her. They turned over every rock, checked every cave, and they all wondered where their dear Rell could have gone. But as hours passed, one by one, they all went back to the huts, promising that the first thing in the morning they would continue to search for her. Rufus, however, he would not give up so easily. He continued on and on, searching, calling out for her, calling her name, and his cousin stood by his side for as long as he could. But even his cousin grew tired, and even he eventually would abandon him, returning to his hut. But he promised Rufus that first thing tomorrow that he would continue the search, and he had to talk Rufus down to make him understand that. Despite wanting to continue a search, he began to get this eerie feeling in the back of his head that he thought he knew where his wife was. He feared he may be right, that she had went back, that she had went to the ocean side where they had sent their son away. And if he was right, He knew what his cousin was saying was true, that he would need every bit of strength he could muster to get there. So, reluctantly, he followed his cousin back, knowing that tomorrow he would venture to the spot and hopefully be able to bring his wife back. So, defeated and sad that he had already lost the early day sunlight, Rufus wobbled home to get just a few hours of sleep. And as Rufus laid looking at the spot his wife would usually lie with him, he patted it as if he was trying to remember what it felt like to have her with him. The man forced himself to sleep, praying that tomorrow would bring his wife back, not knowing that he would have to wait till the next day, not knowing that he would regret wishing. It would only be an hour or two before Rufus would be awakened by his wife. "Rufus, Rufus," she would whisper. The man woke up in a panic at first, but quickly he saw his wife at the door, her back turned towards him. But he knew it was her, and he jumped with joy as he ran to her, wrapping his arms around her. He squeezed her tight. "Where were you? We were looking everywhere." Rufus told her, his arms trembling, as if he was scared that if he let her go, he might never get her back. Rell simply caressed her husband's face, trying to calm him down. "Shh, shh, 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 shh. There," she whispered as she stroked Rufus's face. "I found him. I found our boy." Her words were like a stab to the gut. Rufus had been more than patient, more than kind and understanding. But even he had his limits. He had lost his son too. Yet now it felt like he was losing his wife as well. He could not take it anymore. And in anger, he let go of Rell and turned her around, about to scream at her, about to tell her how selfish she had been, how scared she had made him. But before he could speak a single word, he looked in horror as he stared upon his wife's face. It was twisted and wrong. Her skin was dry and grayed. Her veins popped out and were visible, glowing, even pulsing with energy. But most of all, her eyes. He saw her eyes, her glowing velvet eyes that lacked any humanity. Instinctively, Rufus shoved his wife away, screaming in horror, asking what had happened to her. What did this? At first, she said nothing. She merely turned to her husband and smiled. Her teeth were unusually white as purple mist slowly flowed from her mouth. "I told you, I found him," Rell whispered, but her voice, it was different. It felt as if there were two speaking at once. Rufus could barely hear his wife, but the other voice that spoke with her, the one that felt like it was more dominant, more in control, that Rufus could hear clearly. Slowly, Rufus backed into the corner of the home, his eyes just trying to understand what he was seeing. Well, Rell slowly turned to her side, still smiling as she gently gestured something or someone over to her. Rufus watched in confusion and horror as he saw the impossible. Their son. No. Something pretending, something that barely resembled their son came to the door. His skin was gray, more decayed than Rell's. his eyes, his damn eyes, were filled with the same velvet mist. His little body pulsing with dark energy as he walked up to Rell and hugged his mother. "We can be a family again." Rell's words were not comforting at all as she kissed her son on the head, stroking his hair lovingly, staring down in a way that only a mother could. Rufus's heart started to race as he watched in horror as his family, or what twisted creatures he thought had taken their place. He didn't know what to do but scream for help. He began to shout like a madman, screaming for anyone that could hear. To his real family, he screamed for Rell. He even screamed for his son. He started to yell at the creatures in front of him, threatening them, demanding that they tell him what did they do with his wife, what did they do with his son, where were they? This caused Rell to lose her smile as she glared at her husband, and with impossible speed she ran to him. It was almost as if she had moved to him like a gust of wind. Once she was at the door, the next she was upon Rufus, her hands over his mouth, keeping him quiet, keeping his mouth shut, stifling his screams. She was strong, stronger than him, impossibly strong. This could be his wife. He couldn't move, he couldn't fight. All he could do was look down in horror at Rell as she glared back at him. "Why don't you love us? Why don't you want us to be together?" she spoke. Her words were cold and demanding. Despite asking, it was more as if she was damning him. Rufus could do nothing but tear up as he tried to fight Rell off him. He pounded her shoulders with all his strength. Over and over, he struck at this creature, at this monster. But she was like a wall of iron, unforgiving, without any give in the world. Finally, Rell simply looked at her husband with disgust, while she waved her son over. Rufus could do nothing but watch Remy twitch and crack with every step, almost like a fractured body that had not healed correctly. He could feel the bones almost breaking under its own weight as his little son's body crept towards him. "Shh, shh, 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 shh." Rell hushed her husband, who still tried to scream, but he was unable to get past the grip of his wife's hand as it overwhelmed him. "We will be a family again, my love. You'll see." And with her final words to her husband, she threw him to the ground with such power and disregard for him, with such little care. You could hear the cracking of his arm as it broke on impact. Yet, despite the pain, before Rufus even had a chance to shout, she was upon him. She was over him, straddling her husband. Her hands gripped him as her fingers combed through his hair, yanking his head back, nearly snapping his neck with how forceful she was. He looked up at his wife, while she looked down at him. He trembled in fear, while she looked at him with damning eyes. "Please, Rell, it's me. Don't hurt me." Rell just smiled as she leaned down as if she was about to kiss him. Rufus closed his eyes, knowing he could not fight her. Rufus closed his eyes, knowing he could not fight her. But as she drew close enough to feel her husband's breath on her lips, her mouth opened impossibly wide, almost like it detached, unhinged like a snake. Then came the sound. A storm of anger and hate shouted from her mouth. Rufus opened his eyes, and once again tried to fight back. He tried to move, but Rell had him by the head, by the hair. Her grip was unshakable. All Rufus could do was look up in horror as this mist swirled from her mouth into his, down his throat. It felt as if it was ice and fear. The weight of the world was being shoved into him. It felt as if his entire body was being filled with something too old and large to fit. His skin as if it was being stretched, and his mind was being taken. He could hear a voice he had heard spoken from his wife's mouth, but it talked to him, commanded him, yelled at him in a language he could not understand. Its words he could not ignore. Rell let go of her husband and watched as he rolled around to the floor in pain. She could see him struggling. She could see him fighting. Don't fight it, my love. Don't fight it. We can be together forever now, she whispered to him as she knelt down. She now combed her fingers through his hair once more, but she stroked it almost like the wife she was before, trying to calm Rufus as he turned and twisted in pain. Yet, despite it all, Rufus would not go easily. The man struggled and fought with every inch of his body. His mind raced as he shoved his wife away from him. "Daddy?" Rufus heard his son call out to him. You are not my son!" Rufus shouted, his voice twisted. He could barely hear himself anymore. With every word he spoke, he could hear its voice. The mist. Every thought he had, now he could feel it. No, not the mist. He knew what it was now. He could hear its name, for they were becoming one. He could feel what it's called itself, what it revealed itself to be. It was the abyss. That's all it called itself. One word, the abyss. Still struggling, Rufus stumbled his way forward, trying to escape. But every step felt like a battle of wills. Rell and Remy just watched as their husband and father stumbled his way out the door. Rufus, still fighting, cried out for help the second he left his home. He begged for anyone to save him. But as he left, what he saw next, all hope, any illusion of salvation, instantly vanished. For you see, what he saw, his entire village was waiting for him. They all looked at him, welcoming him with open arms, all with the same great skin and misty velvet eyes. In that moment, Rufus fell to his knees, defeated, as Rell's hand gently fell onto his shoulder, and his son wrapped his arms around him. I told you, we can be together now, forever. But it wasn't Rell saying it to him. It was the abyss. Rufus trembled as he felt himself wash away. His eyes turned misty and twisted. Finally, the man stood, putting his hands over his family. Forever, Rufus spoke. Or was it the abyss? He could not tell. It did not matter anymore. They were one and the same. So, adventurer, what do you think? Would you have been able to resist the abyss? Or are we all weak when it comes to matters of the heart. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, in the great eye we trust.